Alright, here we go. You are looking at AP Government, our Part 3 notes for Unit 1. Last time we left off with the Constitutional Convention. To back up just a little bit to help refresh your memory, don't forget we're at the Constitutional Convention because of the weakness of the Articles of Confederation. Things that will push the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia is a lack of money within the states. After the Revolutionary War, you have a lot of the states are in a depression stage. A lot of people are going to have their homes foreclosed on. You have some state legislatures under the control of people that are pretty sympathetic, though. So now you have bankers and people who lend money at odds with state legislatures who, because they support the people that fought in the war. So you have a lot of people that are siding with farmers and lower class citizens that just don't have a lot of money. Rhode Island absolutely, positively becomes a leader in this sense. They, as you can see, adopt policies to help out debtors, the people that owe the money over the creditors, and a lot of the creditors are actually going to print some of their own money. And Rhode Island just basically pushes them all away. They try and settle people's debt for them. Rhode Island, you don't see it here, but Rhode Island is becoming very wealthy off of taking in all these people that owe money at this point in time. What they don't want is banking restrictions and trade restrictions. They're making money off of poor people at this point, is what it comes down to. So right before we have the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, you have to have something that really pushes the brink of it. And I mentioned before, what you have is Shays' Rebellion. Shays' Rebellion, as we talked about in class, you have Captain Daniel Shays, who fought in the Revolutionary War, and a lot of others lose their land. They actually get hold of weapons at an armory, attack a courthouse, and really hold some people hostage so that they can't foreclose on some people's land. So let's get to the convention. The last thing I mentioned to you was what the delegates are like at the convention. It's all men. You got 55 men. The only state not represented is Rhode Island. What you have are some equality issues at the convention. You have, like discussed in class, large state versus small state. Large state not in terms of land, but in terms of population. With the Constitutional Convention, you'll have the New Jersey Plan, the Virginia Plan, and eventually what's known as the Great Compromise or the Connecticut Compromise. Another big issue which goes along with equality is the issue of slavery. How do you count slaves? How do they figure into your population? And should that count into a greater say in the government because they're part of your population, even though you don't treat them as citizens? They're not citizens. Equality in voting. Some states think that you have to own land. Other states say you shouldn't own land. Some states are saying there has to be qualifications. Other states say no, as long as you're here, that's enough qualifications. So these are issues right up front. In your textbook, they have a nice little chart of it talking about equality, slavery, and equality in voting, who gets to vote. A lot of these are going to get hammered out through the Connecticut Compromise, and we'll see that momentarily. One of the biggest issues at the Constitutional Convention is money, pure money. And this is where you're going to get your two sides. They're going to start before the Constitution is even completed. You have the Federalists, the people who support the Constitution, and you have your Anti-Federalists, the people who obviously don't support the Constitution and the new system of government that is really being authored by Madison. Of note, just a little side note here, the Anti-Federalists are named by the Federalists. They do not take the name themselves. It's a name pushed on them. It's a political move. Federalist is supposed to stir the emotions and want people to join along with them. The Federalists give their opposition the name Anti-Federalist so that people will go against them. As you can see here, it's not surprising that the framers, or the people that I call the founding fathers of the Constitution, would seek to strengthen economic powers of the new national government. Why do they want to strengthen the powers of the new national government? Because it was a major weakness of the Articles. They need to be able, you can see by the second bullet here, that Congress needs to be able to tax and borrow. This is one of those essential characteristics of any central government system. You also need to protect the natural rights, and you can see at the third bullet that it's going to be part of the national government. That's what needs to happen. Ensure that people have their natural rights, and of course, don't forget Jefferson is the one who changes things over and changes Locke's idea from property to the pursuit of happiness. But the message is still clear. Property is very important. It goes back to that idea. Is this country, is the formation of the government founded on religious principles, or is it founded on economic principles? So you can take a look in your textbook. This is going to be in chapter 4. You're going to see the Constitution actually addresses the economics questions and in the separation of powers. Congress has the power to levy taxes and pay debt. And you see some other key things that are going to come out. All of these things that you see here that really settled the economic issues once the Constitution is finally drafted. All of these issues. We'll go into more detail as we move forward and talk specifically about powers of the legislative branch, and we talk in more detail about the separation of power and the system of checks and balances. Other crucial issues that you're going to have at the Constitutional Convention, individual rights issue. This is your natural rights. Don't forget that Locke believed in limited government. This issue is something that's very important. People want to know that the new government isn't going to step on their rights, that they are there because the people allow them to be there. The power needs to be separate so that, like Madison keyed on, which was mentioned in class, this way you prevent tyranny from occurring, whether it be a tyranny from a majority to a minority. It makes no difference. If it's the other way around, people want to know that their individual rights are always going to be protected, because if you have a majority group that is being tyrannical over a minority group, what are they really stepping on? Their natural rights. So this is an issue that gets addressed because you have separation of power. The delegates themselves are very loyal to the state that they come from. So from the get-go, your delegates are looking out for this. The Constitution itself doesn't actually address any of our personal freedoms that go along with our natural rights. What are these rights? Your personal freedoms: life, liberty, and property. You owning property. The one thing it does mention is habeas corpus, which is directly written into the Constitution. Habeas corpus has only been suspended in the United States once, and that was during the Civil War. Habeas corpus is being notified why you're being imprisoned. Nowadays we handle habeas corpus by a combination of Miranda rights, being read your Miranda rights, and having a first appearance where they tell you if you get bond or not, if you can get out of jail or not. And we'll get into that when we talk a little more civil liberties. Other things to address about your personal freedom, it does mention that states are prohibited from passing bills of attainder. We will talk more about that again as we get to civil liberties, and ex post facto laws we'll also talk about. But as far as your personal freedoms, life, liberty, property, this is about the extent of what the Constitution says about your natural rights. We'll get a little more into that, and it does have something to do with the argument of Federalists and Anti-Federalists. You'll see that the Federalists say that because the Constitution isn't very specific about it, it means you have it. It's vague on purpose, where the Anti-Federalists say that it needs to be expressly written. Moving on, some other rights, life, liberty, property, you see that in religion, should there be freedom of religion, treasonous acts, what's considered by someone to be treasonous against the government may simply be their right to life and their freedom to choose a side when there's an argument. One big freedom that everybody agrees on that probably needs to be addressed is the whole right to trial, and especially public trial, because this is something that they did not enjoy under the rule of England. So, talking about some of the major issues at the convention. They're major because they each need a compromise to resolve. Number one, representation in the new national government. Big states versus small states. This is your New Jersey versus your Virginia plan. Remember, New Jersey thinks that everybody should have equal representation. They're a small state. They have a small population. Lots of money, but a small population. Virginia is a large state in terms of population, and they say that they should have more of a say because the government affects more of them at one time. They have the same amount of money as New Jersey. That's why you see such a battle going on. And of course, you're going to end up with the Connecticut Compromise or the Great Compromise. Your textbook, actually this isn't your textbook, this is from Government by the People textbook, an older version. Here you can see some basic differences between the two plans, your Virginia plan on the left, or the center column, and your New Jersey plan on the right hand column, and of course the issue, how they address both issues. You can see that they're really just opposites of one another in the sense, do you rely on the national government or do you rely on the state government to aid you? The Connecticut Compromise handles this issue. It creates what's known as a bicameral legislature, which means two houses. One house is going to be based on population. The other one will be equal representation. It solves the problem of a national executive. It says there's just going to be one, not two. That's going to be the president. And it says, hey, let's not handle everything in state courts. Let's make one national Supreme Court, and everything should flow down from there. So here's your compromises between the plans about representation and basically the voice of the states in the national government. Other major issues, voting rights. A lot of people felt that the states should establish the rules and regulations on who should vote, and some other people say that the national government should have a say on it. Ultimately, the compromise that's agreed upon is that each state decides. We still have this argument in our government today. In the state of Florida, you have people that throughout the state of Florida, you have to show identification that it's okay for you to vote. And right now in our system, we have states like Pennsylvania who tried to institute the same regulation for voting and guidelines for voting, and it got challenged. And they were told in Pennsylvania that they can't make people show any type of identification. You can't have that as a qualification to vote. Moving on, number 3, regulation of commerce and trade. This is expressly addressed in the Constitution. Commerce, money, trade, money. Article 4, Article 1, both of these address commerce and really show the compromise that's taken. Slavery is another major issue. Does the Constitution actually say anything on slavery? This is an issue not for our government, but the delegates at the convention felt it was more of an issue of morality, not legality. This issue is solved with compromise. The compromise is known as the 3/5 compromise, and it resolves the issue of representation in the government and taxation, but it doesn't solve the problem of morality. And this is, as you know, another issue that will move us forward towards the Civil War. Here's our last slide for part 3. You can pretty much read what you have. All you need to know that's left is that we're about to enter into ratification. Who's going to agree to have this new government and who won't? Keep your eye out for part 4.